Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figured Out Cast for February 2018. I'm Adam Koralik, and I am joined by a fan here. We got my boy Rob Janos is here. What's up, man?
Greetings and salutations from New Jersey. How you doing, Adam?
I'm not bad. I'm not bad. You guys might recognize his name. He's been on this podcast we've given you a shout out multiple times. He's also you show up a lot in the live shows. So you're always doing super chats and stuff. And if you guys watched the latest playload, he donated something very cool. So very happy that you could join me on this episode.
Oh, I'm pleasure to be here. Always try and catch you every month, and happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Yeah, you and I recently hung out. Like, I think I told this story in Playload, but I'll tell it again. So you contacted me, right? And you're like, hey, I have this thing I want to send you. And so I didn't know that just like 2 weeks later I was going to be actually seeing you when you actually sent that. So like the irony is he sent me this package that I could have just gotten from him in person, but I ended up having it sent to me because I didn't know I was about to see this dude. I thought that was weird. Small world, man.
Well, I guess better than carrying around New York City, for a couple days.
That is true. So. Yeah, he hung out with me in sorry, you're from New Jersey, but you hung out with me in New York, which was really cool of you to do. Took me to a cool pizza place and other things, an Indian restaurant. It's good stuff, man.
I appreciate it, man. It's New York's like the best place in the world, in my opinion, for food. So it's always great.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it definitely has a ton of options. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've known each other for a little while, and it's cool to have him on here finally. So, with that, Rob, you got to pick several subjects for this particular podcast. So I kind of organized this, and I wanted to start with your first one here. You wanted to talk about Nintendo Labo. So do you want to first of all introduce what it is, just in case people don't know, and then I guess give your opinion on it?
So basically last month Nintendo announced that they were launching this almost an arts and crafts kind of game for the Switch, which involves attaching the Switch Joy-Cons and the screen to basically cardboard, and using it in a way to interact with the various games on this cartridge. So I know a lot of the hardcore kind of Nintendo fanboys and everything, were really upset that Nintendo's kind of going back into gearing their stuff towards children, but I know a lot of people think that it's really unique and it was unexpected, which you could always count on Nintendo to be.
Yeah, see, I didn't get all bent out of shape about Nintendo Labo like a lot of people did, because at the end of the day, this isn't aimed at me. This isn't meant to get my money. It's meant to get that of like a kid, or a parent buying it for a kid more accurately. So I can see where the jokes come in. Sony's working on VR, and then Microsoft's working on 4K experiences, and Nintendo's working on cardboard. I get why that's funny, but again, at the end of the day, everyone listening to this wasn't meant for you. And you're not forced to buy it. You vote with your wallet. If you don't like it, you don't have to pay for it. But I promise you this, Nintendo Labo will sell like crazy.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, they're obviously gearing it towards children, and Nintendo's done that historically a lot with their consoles and games and accessories. And more often than not, the kids aren't the ones that find that stuff interesting. It's usually people our age or maybe a little bit older or younger, so it'll be interesting to see how much interest kids are going to even have in this Nintendo Labo thing, or if it's just going to be this niche thing that only kind of hardcore Nintendo collectors go for.
It's interesting because you say that from basically the Western perspective. So the way Nintendo typically operates is they focus very much on the Japanese market and Japanese trends. And then anything that comes out here, we just kind of have the windfall of that. They've decided Japanese children, for some reason, will want cardboard toys. That's what they've decided. So that's why it exists. And then they're just going to happen to release it here. And you're right when you say over here, what will probably happen is it'll be more aimed towards people our age who just decide, hey, that's really cool because it's got Nintendo's name on it. Actual, American kids may not care as much. But that doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it still gets sold. But in Japan, video games are kind of more for children than they are for anybody else, which is kind of weird. But or uber nerds. So it is funny, but but at the end of the day, man, you don't have to buy this. Nobody has to buy it if you don't want it.
No, of course, and I just find it interesting. Maybe they were spurred on by the success of the cardboard cereal box of the Nintendo Mario cereal. So, if that cardboard sells, maybe this will sell.
See, I like to think that that's true, but that's way too short of an R&D time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they didn't know that it was going to sell that well. But I think it's funny to think that that was possible. But, yeah, no. You know, the one thing I have against this, really, because, again, as I keep saying, this wasn't aimed at me, so I have no expectations of it. But the thing that kind of does bug me about it is that because it is actually cardboard, it probably will break very easily. A lot of kids are probably going to wreck this, and that's probably part of the point. Because they can probably sell you the cardboard assets minus the game cart like pretty cheap and pretty easily, so they probably aren't too worried about kids breaking it, because that's a great way to resell you stuff. What do you think?
You know, that the consumer, you know, aspect of just being able to kind of resell sheets of cardboard to kids, you know, when they just inevitably destroy it, you know, it's interesting. You know, I'll be curious to see if they end up selling it separate from the game, because it does make sense, and it literally costs nothing to kind of produce and distribute. So
I'll bet you still, though, it would cost, they'd charge like $19.99, because I think the game pack version is what, $69.99?
Yeah.
All right, so basically a normal Switch game would be about, you know, $59.99, $49.99. So they'll probably charge you like $10, $20 if you want to buy like replacement cardboard, because that's an unbelievable way to get some money. Because as you point out, it costs almost nothing to produce that, and then they can still sell it to you with Nintendo's name all over it.
What I think will be interesting is if the video game community finds ways of hacking the Nintendo Labo software in order, so like you could see them making these giant mech suits out of cardboard and incorporating it into the Labo somehow. Yeah,
would be neat.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's even possible. I mean, I'm sure it's possible.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think there's anything technical in the cardboard or anything. There's no, you know, I think it's all the Joy-Cons. So.
Yeah, it's all the Joy-Cons, and it's the only thing quote unquote technical about the cardboard is kind of the positions in which they've placed the Joy-Cons, so allowing for that kind of movement. So I guess in theory anybody could do that, but then you have to have software that functions with it. That's the trick. But yeah, you're right. I mean, any sort of independent community might be able to rig that up, no problem. All right, do we have anything else to say on Nintendo Labo?
I'm in wait and see mode, honestly. I think you know, it's definitely intriguing. I don't think I'm going to be a day one subscriber, but who knows? Could be cool.
I guess that would have been my next question, is are you actually looking to buy this?
I don't know. You know, from the collecting standpoint, I think it's cool, but it's I could just not see myself sitting in my game room with a bunch of cardboard on me, you know, playing video games.
Yeah, I'm of the same philosophy. Like, I can't see myself ever actually playing this, but there is that part of me that's like, hey, if you get a full Switch set, you're going to have to own this. And I'm like, ah, fuck. Like, that's the part that bothers me. But, you know, I certainly am not going to buy this right away. But it's also something I think where if you have any interest in it, you should buy it right away, because used versions of this will inevitably be like broken and destroyed cardboard. So, yeah, exactly. So, like, you might want to get it just because, like, down the road, it might be harder to get one that's not completely destroyed.
Yeah, you know, and then of course you have to deal with the scumbag Nintendo resellers anyway, probably going out day one and just buying the entire stock of these things and just hoarding them and, you know, jacking up the price. So.
Totally. Do you happen to know when it comes out?
I don't have the exact date.
I mean, is it like this month, or are we talking like this summer? Anybody? I have no idea.
Let's see. I don't think they've announced a release date yet. Oh, I'm sorry. It releases in April 20th.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So we'll have more insight into it potentially in a month from now.
Yep.
Or no, April 20th. No, 2 months from now. My bad. Okay. Well, cool. So any other thoughts on Nintendo Labo?
I think that just about covers it, but.
All right, I'm really looking forward to the PlayStation Laboratory, or whatever the fuck they end up calling theirs, because that's inevitable. This is side note. I mean, you heard that Sony's basically doing like amiibos now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like electronic like component in the figures themselves to interact with the PlayStation, but you know, just as a sheer collectible, you know.
Yeah. Really? There's nothing. I guess that kind of makes sense to me. Does the PS4 controller even have a way to read that?
I guess maybe, I know they have that touchpad on the PS4 controller. That might be the only way of doing it, but I from what I heard about those like Sony amiibos, I don't think they're doing anything in game.
And this wasn't even a subject on the list. I'm just curious now. Are you going to get any of those?
Probably not. I have a PS4. I love it, but I'm not really a collector for the console. If there's like a single figure that looks cool or is from a game that I'll like, maybe I'll pick it up, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset. Like, the only one I would kind of want is Sweet Tooth from the Twisted Metal franchise. Yeah. Like, aside from that,
Yeah, I could go for like a Jack and Daxter one or a Sly Cooper. I think that would be kind of cool, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah, nothing against their characters. I'm sure they got plenty of good ones people would like. It's just, it is always funny, though. Like, Nintendo can do, like, the weirdest, dumbest thing, like Labo, and have it be insanely successful. And, like, everyone else can try it, and they just can't come close.
Yep.
It's weird, man. It's weird. But it is what it is. So, all right, I guess with that, we will move on. Speaking of Nintendo, you also wanted to talk about this. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to mostly defer to you on this one because I was unable to watch this. But Nintendo did their January mini direct. I was out of the country, so I was unable to see it, and I just haven't found the time to go back because I bounce around too much. So what happened? What were you excited about? Tell me.
So I know that there was a massive amount of hype on the internet about this direct because I think a lot of people are expecting Nintendo to do this big first quarter direct that will announce kind of their first party titles going forward into the spring and early summer. So you heard everybody like, oh, are they going to announce the new Super Smash Brothers? Are they going to show some footage of Metroid Prime or Pokemon or something like that? So they basically, there was all this anticipation about it, and then they just announced this thing, I think the day before it went live, and it was basically a surprise mini direct instead of like this giant, kind of hour-long presentation that a lot of people were doing. So I think a lot of people got the air let out of their balloon a little bit just, by the length of this thing and not having that heavy-hitting first-party presence that they were expecting. But I think there was some good stuff in there. They announced a port of the Dark Souls to the Switch, which is kind of in the same vein as something like Skyrim or L.A. Noire, a last generation game being ported over to it. They announced a port of a DS game called The World Ends With You, and a bunch of Wii U ports. They announced all those. Yeah.
That explains when my Twitter blew up with like, Adam called it. I kept saying for a while, like, I figured that the Switch was gonna, for this year, would get a lot of the Wii U's greatest hits.
Yeah.
And so like it's getting Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze and some others, right?
Yeah, it's getting Hyrule Warriors, which is like a definitive edition with all the DLC in it. They're also getting some new DLC for Pokken Tournament, which is another Wii U port. Kind of the big announcement aside from Dark Souls was they announced a new Mario Tennis game on the Switch, which is actually going to be the first one since the Game Boy Advance version, I believe, that actually has a story mode in it. So I know a lot of people are kind of excited about that, but it's nowhere along the lines of, a Super Smash Brothers or a Metroid, but it's still, Mario Tennis is a big franchise still.
That is exactly what I thought they were going to do. Like, that's what I kept saying. I was like, 2018 for them is probably going to be a lot of Wii U's greatest hits and just kind of filler while they let the big third parties do stuff because they don't have anything. They're in the middle of developing all their bigger stuff, so they just have teams porting games that already exist. And it's actually fucking genius because the majority of people never owned a Wii U, so to them, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is a brand new game.
Yeah, of course. And I think the people that are upset about these Wii U ports pretty much are reserved for, people who did have the Wii U and bought these games, and maybe even collectors who might see the value of their Wii U collection go down because now Tropical Freeze is on the Switch, now Pokken's on the Switch, and basically getting these things devalues the Wii U versions.
That's precisely accurate. And I can't confirm this, but I swear I was clicking around yesterday and I saw something that said that they were porting over Hello Kitty Tournament or Hello Kitty Cruisers to the Switch, which is the single most expensive Wii U game. And if that's true, I mean, like, that really, lets the air out of the balloon as far as the collecting market for the Wii U. Not that that's, who gives a shit, like, that's a terrible game. But it is, like, the pinnacle of expensive on that console. And for even that one to be brought over is like, well, damn. We're just really burying the Wii U, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to hear anything regarding the Wii U from Nintendo for a very, very long time, And
yeah, they'll acknowledge its existence, but that's about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think these ports on the system are really good. It's like, I've played a lot of the Switch since it came out, and I find myself saying to, oh man, I would wish that this game had a Switch version. I'd love to take it. The portability aspect really is attractive to me because, as you know, I travel a lot, and as do you. So being able to bring those games on the go is fantastic. So, like seeing a Dark Souls or Tropical Freeze, games that I have, but I've never really gotten the chance to dive into. I'm excited for them, just being able to play them a little bit easier.
I agree completely, but that still makes me sad because I did love the Wii U, and I think I told this story so there's a game that just came out in Europe called Sing It 2018. And it's on the PS4, it's on the Switch, and it's on the Wii. They put it on the original Wii, but they skipped the Wii U version. There is no Wii U version of that game. And I find that fascinating, because, that's how much they're burying the Wii U, that it doesn't even get, the garbage end-of-the-line games that most consoles get. It never got sports titles, it never got any of those. And I just think that's, set aside that the game isn't that interesting, do you not find it fascinating that there's a game that came out on one generation of hardware, skipped one, and then went to the next generation after that?
Well, I think
I can't think of any other examples of that.
I mean, I thought it was fascinating when Ubisoft released Just Dance on three console generations, really.
I agree with that completely,
which was fascinating. I'm actually curious to see if they do announce Just Dance 2019, if they do the same thing that Sing It did. I could see them releasing it on the Wii like they did for the previous one and just skipping the Wii U,
Yeah, it's entirely possible, and I guess we'll find that out probably at E3 this year. That's usually when that announcement comes out, but it's just that to me is so perplexing, and it says a lot about how disrespected the Wii U ultimately was. But it is what it is.
I think that it helps that at least you could play those Wii games on your Wii U. If they released a Wii U version, not a Wii version, you can't go back and play those on your Wii. But you could do the opposite. So maybe that's their thinking behind it.
That definitely is, because if you look at the box of Sing It, it straight up says, "Hey, this will work on the Wii U." But that's just backwards compatibility. That still to me is fundamentally bizarre. But some people, I actually told this story on the latest Playload, and some people actually pointed this out to me. They said there's probably games that came out on the 7800, Atari 7800, and Atari 2600 that skipped the 5200. So it's not without total precedent.
Yeah.
But it's still weird. But hey, it is what it is. And I think at this point in time, there's only one Wii U game still coming, and that's Axiom Verge, although supposedly it's come out, but I haven't heard anybody to actually have it.
Yeah, didn't that just come out on the Switch too, Axiom Verge?
It definitely came out on the Switch. I've got the Switch version. But the Wii U version got a physical release, supposedly, in Europe, but I'm yet to find anybody in Europe who actually says, yeah, I found it, I have it. That's how weird Wii U collecting is now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's Nintendo Direct, I guess. Anything else about that, or do you want to move on?
I'll be curious to see when their next Direct is, and if it kind of continues this trend of just ports as opposed to secondary franchises as opposed to some of the big hitters. So we'll see what happens.
I think that's exactly how it will be until E3. I think around that time they'll announce something bigger, but something bigger that comes out in a year from then.
Yeah.
Or a year and a half from then, because they just don't. I'm pretty convinced Nintendo doesn't have major titles for 2018. They might have one in the can, and they'll put that out around the holidays, but that's a full year from now almost.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's their plan. And again, it makes sense, that they did this intelligently. They buried the Wii U in such a way that the mass market never knew it existed. So to them, The Switch is the new Nintendo console, and then there was the Wii. There was no Wii U as far as the mass market is concerned. And that's actually really smart because you were able to come up with this new exciting platform, and then you can take all your greatest hits of this other game console. So to most people, it just looks like, hey, there's all these great games on this thing. It's awesome. But really, it's just a fucking hatch job, like trying to cobble together a console. But it works.
Well, I think it was also, I think their strategy of basically front-loading the Wii, the Switch's releases last year by just giving us a Mario and a Zelda and a Splatoon and a Mario Kart all in one year to entice that third-party support back with the sales of the console and those games. So maybe I think they're banking a lot on third-party support of just ports and maybe a few exclusives this year to really push the console.
I'm in 100% agreement. And the other thing that they did that's really smart is they've completely embraced indies, especially physical indies. And even to the point where they're doing things they would never have let happen in the past. Like Limited Run Games is going to start publishing physical indies for the Switch. There's no way, even just a couple years ago, that Nintendo would have ever allowed that. Yep. So it's actually rather impressive. I guess that's the good thing about having a console fail, is that it really humbles you as a company, because then you start making smarter changes for the benefit of the customer. And I got to give them credit for that. So good on them. Hopefully they keep up with that. Anything else to say on this, or should you ready to move on to the next subject?
We're ready.
Okay, so the next subject is also something you selected. You wanted to talk about the new Sega products from Retrobit, and if I understand correctly, you're talking about the wireless Genesis, Saturn, and Dreamcast controllers.
Yeah, and I definitely bow to you on this. I know you wear your Dreamcast love on your sleeve, so I mean,
bit.
I mean, how excited are you about this? Having wireless controllers for a lot of these these retro systems.
I would describe myself as cautiously optimistic. So basically, when I first heard about this, there was a lot of rumors floating around about what Retrobit was doing. And a lot of people were thinking, oh, clone consoles. I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. Other than, the Genesis, you got a million of those, but whatever. And then when people said, like, oh, no, we're getting, like, wireless controllers for the Genesis, the Saturn, and the Dreamcast. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. You have these wireless controllers for use on, like, the PS4 or use on the Xbox One or a PC. Until I was like sitting there just staring blankly at an article with photos and everything, I just would never have believed that they were actually making new controllers for those actual consoles. Like, it's hard for me to accept in 2018 that we're going to have wireless Dreamcast controllers produced that actually are not designed to be used on an Xbox One or something. They're meant to be used on a fucking Dreamcast. That blew my mind. Now, the thing is, I know it sounds like I'm like super excited, or I should be, but I am also at best cautiously optimistic, because Sega is not actually producing these. Sega is simply giving their consent to Retrobit. Now, I don't exactly associate Retrobit with like high grade quality. I mean, they make a lot of different controllers, but I've used some in the past and never been particularly happy with them. And Sega is, just because Sega's licensing it doesn't really mean shit. Sega licenses everything that they can get a buck out of. There's so many crappy like clone consoles that play like shit that they've put their name on because it's just, they don't have to do anything. They just collect a check for it. So that's to say, I have no idea if these controllers will be any good. I'm definitely, I want to try them out. I want to check them out. I want them to be good. I'm excited on the basis that if they're good, that's fucking awesome, that's a real thing. But I don't have enough evidence to suggest that they will actually be quality products to be really invested. What about you?
I mean, I don't think, in my experience, with Retrobit products, I definitely put them above something like the Tech Toy brand. I'm sorry, not Tech Toy, the At Games, stuff.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
They're definitely better than that, and these are a lot. These controllers, and their products are definitely geared towards collectors like us, that are, looking for accessibility options on retro consoles, with cord length and, video cables. You saw with the Dreamcast, they're making new VGA boxes because, because the original ones that Sega produced are just extremely rare and are very expensive, and then you have ones like the Akura, which are rare and expensive. So I think they see the market in which these things are going to be targeted to, and I at least I hope that the quality is going to reflect that. They know that people like yourself that aren't going to go for something that's done half-assed. So you see, like, the packaging and everything, they matched up the designs with the period correct packaging, which is, that's all really cool. Yeah. So I'm definitely intrigued by that. I've been looking to definitely the VGA box. I've been looking to upgrade to a VGA for my Dreamcast for a while, and just haven't had.
Oh yeah, you should really do that.
Because I'm running S-Video right now, and it looks fine, but the VGA just looks incredible. But I haven't found a really cost-effective option to do that. So at least in halfway decent quality. So I'm excited to see that. I'm also excited to have a Dreamcast controller without the stupid cable on the bottom. Should be easier to play.
Yeah, I am curious what the battery life is going to be in those things. Especially if the Dreamcast one has to like fuel the VMU and a rumble pack and all that shit. Like the Saturn and the Genesis, I could see lasting quite some time. There's nothing else really in them. But
yeah, I don't think
Dreamcast one.
I don't think they revealed whether or not those are going to have an internal or like rechargeable battery, or if they are just going to take AA's like a Wavebird or something.
God, I hope they don't do that. Like that would feel very 90s. Like, it would be like, oh, Sega could have put this out in the 90s, but who cares? Like, at that point, I'd rather just use a wire. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to go around buying batteries and, like, worrying if they're going to work or not. It's like, my Dreamcast isn't even that far from me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind a cable. You know what I mean? That's my personal setup, so whatever. Everybody's going to be different. But a wireless one that's rechargeable, that has infinitely more value. But I can see why they might not do it that way. Because, again, quality, reliable, or rechargeable batteries, expensive. Yeah. So, I don't know. But they have gotten cheaper over the years, so maybe that's why they're doing this. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And, I think if the battery life on those are like at least halfway decent, maybe to the length of an Xbox One or even a GameCube Wavebird controller, I think I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised they did all three at once. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know as much about Retrobit's current line of products. Because usually it's like NES and SNES and N64 controllers they've been doing, and GameCube, right? But
yeah.
They did do a Genesis controller, right?
Yes, they have done a Genesis controller. I know their big thing that they did, like the past two holiday seasons, they released a kind of a NES SNES classic competitor called the Retrobit Arcade, which has a bunch of third party games like stuff from Capcom and other stuff from the 8-bit 16-bit era. So. And I've played around with those. Like, they're pretty fun. They're just kind of plug and play stuff. So I haven't seen really anything in the way of reproduction controllers or anything from them in a while, at least.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm genuinely curious to see how this turns out, and I'm glad they're giving Sega a little bit of love. That's nice to see.
Yeah.
Especially the Dreamcast.
No Master System love.
Yeah, I don't blame him on that one. Like, that one would only really work in Europe. Yeah. And of course, if you want new Master System controllers, just get them from Brazil.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they still make them there. So you
well,
can
I guess
that.
feasibly you could use the Genesis one on the Master System, couldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. So. That's probably part of the plan. I can see why they wouldn't make a Master System one for North America. Like, most people, even amongst most gamers, people have not heard of the Master System in North America. Yeah. It was such a thing that just came and went in the night. There's very few people that ever had it here, which I know to people in Europe can be like perplexing because over there it was retardedly popular, but here most people have never heard of it. That's just how it was. So I could see why they wouldn't bother with it in North America.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm surprised that they're doing the Saturn as well. That's obviously wasn't as big as the Dreamcast or the Genesis, but maybe that's tapping into the Japanese market a little bit more. Just because these things are going to be released worldwide, presumably. So obviously the Saturn did really, really well out there.
Yeah, in Japan it was like stupid successful. It only barely lost to... Well, no, all right, I shouldn't say that. It defeated the N64, but it lost to the PS1. I was going to say it barely lost to the PS1. That wouldn't be accurate. It lost handedly. But it destroyed the N64, so which people never know that. But that's the thing. I mean, does Retrobit even operate in Japan? I can't. I mean, I've been there a couple times, and I can't recall ever seeing their stuff over there.
Yeah.
I could be dead wrong. I never really looked for it, but I don't recall seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that, so who knows.
Yeah, well, either way, I think that's cool that they maybe it's because lately, especially, there's been a lot of people coming around to the Saturn. There's been a lot of people like developing a respect for it, and collection prices for it have skyrocketed. So I'm wondering if they're just trying to piggyback on that, but maybe preparing themselves for the assumption that it won't do that well. But at the same time, no one else makes Saturn controllers, so maybe they're looking at like we would have a monopoly. Like people make Genesis controllers, but nobody makes Saturn stuff. So if there's anybody out there who wants Saturn stuff, we got their money.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen any other. I mean, maybe you have like third-party, more recent Dreamcast stuff as well. Like new controllers or VMUs. I'm not sure if they even do those.
There was definitely a bunch during the actual lifespan of the console.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple that lasted a little bit longer than everybody else, but Saturn in particular really didn't have that, at least in North America. And, in Japan it definitely did. But, yeah, you're right. I don't think that anybody has made new Dreamcast controllers in a while. Except for, like the Bahar Bros, for example, make new Dreamcast VGA boxes. So there are Dreamcast accessories that get made still. But, yeah, you're right. I don't think anybody's been making controllers. But I could definitely be wrong about that.
And I think this shows that this is a transition of new accessories and new products for retro consoles. The shift from boutique manufacturers like Bahar Bros back into a somewhat mainstream maker like Retrobit. That this explosion of popularity in retro video gaming is showing these companies, hey, it makes a lot of financial sense to produce some stuff for these older consoles where the accessories are getting hard to find.
Yeah, totally. Anything else you want to say on the subject, or you want to move on?
No, let's move on.
All right, so the next subject is not one that you picked. It was just something I read about this morning, and I just found it kind of interesting as a YouTuber. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you reach 100,000 subscribers, you are on YouTube, you typically are sent this what's called a silver play button. It's like a framed YouTube logo or icon, and then it has a piece of glass over it, and it says like congratulations on reaching 100,000 subscribers, and then it has your name or your channel written on it. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I actually have one for my other channel, for Game Society, and this channel, my personal channel, is like hovering around there at the time I write there. At the time we make this, it's at like 97,000, so I'm getting up there. So hopefully I can reach that soonish. But apparently they rolled out a new set of rules about how they're now going to start disqualifying various channels from ever receiving that award. So I don't know, even if I reach 100,000, if I'm going to personally get one. And I think it's just kind of weird, like I wonder why they're doing this, but I guess it doesn't. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this at all?
I read about this, and I think YouTube's rationale behind this is that they're trying to penalize channels that they might consider inflammatory or just having content that breaks copyright rules or things like that, and they're trying to penalize that. So I'd be curious to see. I'd be curious if this these guidelines were in effect when Game Society got their little silver play button.
Oh, that was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see. I would have been curious if your channel would have been eligible for it, because you think that if they're demonetizing videos with profanity or inflammatory content, like like some of your stuff might be categorized under, that it would have happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder the same thing. And I also wonder if this channel is eligible for it or not, because the vague description they gave us basically says, like, I should be fine because I don't have content ID strikes, I don't have copyright strikes or anything. But then it also says, like, it's also just up to them. And it's just like, okay, what does that mean? I don't know. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't really care that much. I always thought it'd be kind of cool to get, because there is a like in my videos, I kind of wanted to place it in a specific spot. But if I don't get it,
Just
whatever.
buy one on eBay and say it's yours.
No, it has your name on it, dude. I've already got the one for Game Society. I'll be all right. But yeah, it's just almost like an example of just what YouTube is becoming lately. They're definitely starting to hate their audience a little more, and it's kind of annoying. Or they're trying to. I guess that's an improper way of phrasing that. They're kind of going after their creators a little bit more. But I guess this is just the logical outcome of what has to happen when you have no control over what ends up on your website. So
well, I think people like you and other YouTubers. I think the big problem that you have with all this is the way that they're doing it without efficiently laying out what, like in terms of demonetization and things like that, why you're actually being declined for monetization or being declined for this, the creator award. So, I think just a little bit more transparency and better PR would probably do them a lot better, just to alleviate some of these concerns.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, they must have their reason for that. I would just be curious, like all of us, to know what that reason is. Because presumably what they're... If I'm them, and I know something about, like, hey, we can't tell everybody this is why we're demonetizing videos, because then everyone will just do exactly the opposite thing. It's too many people gaming the system. At least that's my theory, but yeah, that's a tough position for them to be in. I doubt it's as simple as they haven't thought to just tell us. They're obviously doing this for a reason. It's just the $1 million question is, what's that reason?
Well, I think I'm reading their press release on this now, and it's saying that rewarding creators that keep their accounts in good standing without copyright strikes, community guideline violations, or artificially increased subscriber counts. Now, your channel's been around for a long time, and you've kind of, been through the system and gained your YouTube following really organically over that time. So, I don't think any of those, especially the artificial subscriber accounts, would apply to you. So.
Oh yeah, I'm probably legit on that, but like I said, it's whatever. It's not about me. It's more about just how strange it is to be a YouTuber these days, because they're really changing up a lot of stuff over there. It's just weird, man. And it's definitely not a good time to get into YouTube. I can tell you that right now. If you're listening, like, hey, I want to make a YouTube channel, don't. It's not a good time to start. I don't know if there ever will be another good time to start. It might be kind of over. It's like either you're there or you're not. But good luck to you if you try.
Yep, they'll definitely need it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other thoughts on that particular subject?
No, I think we can move on.
Okay, so now we have a round of shout-outs. So everyone who we're going to shout out here is a Patreon backer. They are at the appropriate tier in which they get a shout-out. You can do that at any time if you're choosing as a listener, if you want to join up for the Patreon and you want to go to that particular level. And you can also pick subjects and stuff like that. You can even be on the podcast here like Rob is. It's all up to you. Or you don't have to. You can just listen. Thank you very much. So we got 4 of them because you're already on this, and usually, Rob, you would be getting a shout-out, but you're already here, dude, so I'm not going to shout you out. Yeah. All right, you cool with that?
I'll give myself a shout out.
All right, fine. Let's just go artificially. The first shout out is Rob Janos. What do you have to say about Rob Janos?
I hear that he's a generous, beautiful human being that is a patron of the arts and a connoisseur of fine wine and fine women.
I heard he was a slut. So, but either way, that all works.
That goes without saying.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for Rob for having a sense of humor. Okay, so for the first real one, because Rob's not real. Justin Webb. Justin Webb is a really good dude. He's been hanging around for a long time, and I hope I get to see you soon, dude, if you're listening, because they just announced the new dates for the Missouri Game Con. Last 2 years in a row, Justin has come to the Missouri Game Con to hang out with me. I'm lucky enough to be a guest. He's close enough by that he would actually come up and check that out. Actually, I believe he's from Arkansas, and Missouri Game Con's in St. Louis. That's still a hell of a drive, but he would do it anyway, so that's really awesome of him to do. So thank you very much, Justin, for doing that, and of course for being a Patreon backer. Do you want to try this? Do you want me to give you a name and you can just talk about them, even if you're just making stuff up?
Sure. Let's see. We got Jonas Pachanka.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, interesting fact about Jonas is that the video game Mass Effect has a planet called Tuchanka, which is actually named after him.
Oh, of course. All makes sense now. All right, thank you, Jonas. Next up is Trey Wagner, who is a buddy of mine. Now, interesting thing about him, what you didn't know, you've ever been on a plane and they say you have to put your trays in their upright position? They're actually talking about my buddy because he's always on every flight. And you're like, get him out of here, get him out of here. He's always just hanging around in every single plane ever. And it's fucking weird. So that's actually the expression comes from that, because they're trying to get rid of my buddy.
Oh, that's interesting.
It isn't it? It's fucked up.
Yeah. And then lastly, we got Tim Inman, who, fun fact, actually has a evil mirror universe counterpart called Tim Outman, who looks exactly the same as him, but he has an evil goatee.
Wow. Just like Star Trek.
Or if Tim has a goatee, he does not have a goatee. It's just because,
That's the only difference, other than, like, he just laughs a lot evilly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Tim, for being evil or not evil. I'm not sure which one. Do we have the good one or do we have the bad one?
That's the mystery.
Ooh. All right. Well, thank you to Tim, Trey, Jonas, Justin, and of course you, Rob. So thank you very much to all of you guys. So we'll move on to the next subject here, which was also one that you picked. You wanted to talk about teaching video game history in schools. Now, you talked a bit to me about this in New York, but I want you to kind of just talk fresh. Go.
So basically, I'm a history major currently. I'm going back to college in order to gain my education certification to teach history in high school. And this spring, I actually have the opportunity to teach a after-school extracurricular course at a high school in New York City. And I wanted to do something history related and something that I had knowledge about. And I thought about it, and I decided to do a history course on video games, which is, I find fascinating that in my years in education that I have never seen a course about that subject. There's courses about different facets of musical history or film history or the history of theater, but nothing about video games. So I thought that it would be an excellent way of exposing kids to the history of maybe an art form that they're really, really interested in, but don't have any knowledge about things past, the current generation or one or two before that. So, I took a lot of inspiration both from channels like you and your, Generation Recap series and guys like Norm, the gaming historian. So, I'll be interested to see how that goes. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And also, you're doing a service, because I've actually kind of had a theory on this for a while, like why? Because you're exactly right. Like there really is not much in the way of teaching video game history, and I think it's just because it's not old enough yet. Video games are still perceived as new to a certain generation of people, to the point where that's why you get, older people saying, like, oh, all the shootings are because of video games. Like, because they just don't understand that. I mean, people said the same damn thing about movies and TVs back when they first premiered. Like, you weren't allowed to show a toilet in a movie because it was thought to be, like, that would make people go insane. Like, it's just, you have to have this old generation of people die off who don't understand that art form, and then have the generation that grew up with it get old enough where they want to teach the next generation about it. And that's where we're getting to now. So you're a pioneer in that sense, because that happens with every form of art. We've gone through this same battle every time. If you study all those different forms of art, the same thing always happens. So we're simply in the newest round of it. So you guys are living through history right now, in which we're just starting to teach video game history to people, which I think is pretty cool, because video game history is really very brief. I mean, you can argue that it maybe goes back to the 1940s at the absolute earliest, but to most people, it really doesn't start until the 1970s. Kind of the same way like film starts, early on in the 20th century, but even though there was technically the ability to shoot a film earlier than that, it's kind of the same logic. And then it doesn't, then you get into the golden age like of cinema, just like you get into the golden age of video games. And then you get into the crashes. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of repetition in art.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because if we were to equate this to like the film process, you would basically be teaching the film history and about the equivalency of like 1945. Like that's kind of where you're getting into things. Which means there's still a lot of good stuff coming up if history repeats itself.
Yeah. Well, and the way I'm going to go about this is kind of take a page from your book and do something along the lines of a generational recap over the first, maybe third of the semester. Basically, go through maybe ancient video game history, dealing with early mainframe computers and like the very first video games like Birdie the Brain or Tennis for Two, things like that, Space War. Then move into the creation of Atari and Pong and the Magnavox Odyssey, and basically go through the generations by also touching on big kind of cornerstone events or subjects pertaining to it, like the Great Video Game Crash in '83, or the creation of the ESRB, and the kind of the controversy surrounding the gaming industry from games like Mortal Kombat or Splatterhouse or Grand Theft Auto, things like that. So
yeah,
I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, that's actually another really good way of putting it, because much like film industry, there's always like one movie that comes along and kind of breaks everything for everybody, and then they have to create a whole bunch of rules. Video games, same thing. Mortal Kombat and Night Trap really kind of forcing the ESRB into existence. Same type of thing, man. So video game history is fascinating, setting aside when you actually like video games. Like, I'm sure most people listening to this would agree with that, since they're probably into video games already. But even if you're not, it's just a fascinating subject matter to approach from a purely historical perspective.
Yeah, and plus, I also want to give the kids a little bit of perspective, because a lot of these high school students were born, in the early 2000s. Maybe their first gaming experiences were on the PlayStation 2 or the GameCube or something like that.
Yep.
And I have a substantial collection of retro games and consoles, so I would love to be able to give these kids hands-on experience with consoles that maybe they would have never have been exposed to, like bring in a Virtual Boy or a Vectrex, or something like an Atari 2600 or a Sega Game Gear, for them to kind of put their hands on, get a feel for it, and maybe make that connection that gives them an appreciation for older hardware and software.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And, a lot of time I see people kind of say, like, oh, what's the point? It's just old shit. And it's like, is Casablanca just old shit? Is Gone with the Wind just old shit? Like, just because it's, in black and white, or in case of Gone with the Wind, just old, it doesn't make it bad. And it was popular and solid for a reason. And then, of course, you're going to have your junk in there just like you had shitty junk movies, you have shitty junk consoles, but you can learn from that. You can learn from bad movies how to make a good one. You can learn from bad game consoles how to appreciate a good one. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's I find it fascinating to study as a subject and to try and express it to other people so that they can hopefully see the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to try and tell the kids, like maybe in the first class, that it's like any illusions or prejudice that you might have towards one video game console or video game company, I'm going to be like, kind of check your fanboyism at the door. I think this is a history class that we try and be unbiased. I want to look at some consoles that are failed, or different companies or franchises that have failed through a historical lens, and basically analyze them without show them a game like E.T. for the Atari 2600 that a lot of people regard as the worst game of all time, which it probably isn't.
Definitely not.
Yeah, it was emblematic of a lot of the issues that were happening at that time in gaming, but just say, like, this game has its merits. This, even a failed console like the 3DO or the Jaguar, they all have merits, and they should be appreciated and examined for what they brought to gaming. Yeah,
I agree completely. Yeah, the out of the holster ET joke is it's a joke, But most
Yeah.
people say it because they don't know enough about the subject. That's just the one they know. So the point is to educate on the subject and just kind of show like, no, man, there's definitely stuff worse than E.T. E.T. is just famous for it because of the incident that surrounded it. You know, but there's definitely crap that's way worse you've never heard of.
Well, and it's like, you know, the internet's an echo chamber. So if one website or one person like the Angry Video Game Nerd says that this console is a piece of shit or this game is the worst game ever, like a lot of people are going to adopt that opinion just because, you know, a loud voice on the internet told them to, you know. So it's like, you know, I think getting the chance to experience some of that gaming allows you to form your own opinions and maybe your own appreciations for something that's not mainstream.
I agree. And I've tried to teach myself stuff like that too over time. Like I used to share similar opinions about the Jaguar and the Jaguar CD, and then I started playing it more, and I was like, this really isn't that bad. It's just it never got its chance, you know. It made tons of mistakes, but it does have its benefits and its merits, and it's ultimately just kind of a cool thing. The fact that it ever existed is just kind of neat.
Yeah, I mean, like another example is you always make it a point of saying when talking about the fifth generation that arguably the most technologically capable and advanced console in that generation was the Pippin. You know, probably the biggest failure of that generation. So, you know, it shows that it's like, wow, you know, what could have been if this thing actually did what it was supposed to do. You know, I
agree completely. Yeah, I mean, obviously I made the point originally, so obviously I agree with it. But yes, do you have a Pippin?
Hell no.
Oh, well then, because that's an interesting thing to bring into. All right, so a few years back I made a video, like where the subject was about why is Nintendo hardware not more powerful. Yeah. And the crux of the argument was people were upset that the Wii U wasn't as capable of the current generation hardware. And I was trying to explain to everybody, like, Nintendo never does this. Nintendo never seeks out to make the most capable console in any generation. And that's true. They don't. There is a difference with the Wii and the Wii U. They intentionally held back much further, but they never tried to have the pinnacle of technological supremacy. And I find a lot of people will very falsely respond by being like, no, N64, it had the 64 bits, so it's the most powerful. Because the only PlayStation was the other console. There was nothing else. I'm like, you don't know anything. Like, you literally have never heard of any of these other consoles. Including the Pippin being a prime example where it's like, no, it was more capable than any of them, by far. People will be like, oh no, the GameCube was more powerful than PS2, so you don't know what you're talking about. Like, did you just forget the Xbox existed? Like, that happens constantly in that argument. And that's where I feel like you're absolutely right. You need to have people get kind of out of their quick comfort zone with the history of games. Like, people just typically remember a handful of consoles from any given cycle, and they kind of forget everything else that ever happened. And I mean, you know, if it's not your interest, you're only going to learn so much about it, like with anything. But for those who actually have a genuine interest, like anybody who would watch a video like that and want to comment on it and feel the need to get involved, that's your audience of people who need to be educated on that particular subject. And I think you're doing a good job with that, or hopefully you will be.
Yeah, so unfortunately I don't have a Pippin to bring into class, so I'll just have to show him your video on it, and that should suffice.
All right, cool. I can send you some high-res photos if you need it.
Oh, and I appreciate that.
No problem. So we good here? You want to move on?
I think we're good.
All right. So our next subject comes to us from Patreon backer Corey Marsh, who every month gets to pick a subject. And thank you very much, Corey, for being at that Patreon level. So I talked to him last night, and he was super excited about. He had just got. He's trying to basically hook everything up through RGB SCART, and so he had picked up a CRT, and he basically just wanted to talk about, you know, what my opinion was on using a CRT versus something like a high-grade upscaler like the FrameMeister or OSSC. So specifically his question was, is it worth getting a high-grade upscaler like the FrameMeister or an OSSC versus a cheap SCART to HDMI adapter when you're using a CRT? So what I told him, and I'll say here now, is CRTs to me are too inconvenient. There might be visual benefits that, in my opinion, are largely based on nostalgia, because ultimately it just comes down to what your eyes determine and what your eyes feel is worth your time, essentially. Now, to some people, that difference perhaps partially fed off of nostalgia, is worth having a fucking 200-pound CRT in their house. I am not of that mindset. So I went with the HD TV route, and with that, of course, comes huge problems when trying to connect retro consoles. So that's why I went with routes like using the FrameMeister and using the OSSC, because they alleviate a lot of that. So when you get that all connected, it looks absolutely sublime. And that's where I'm at with that. Now, basically, I can't answer with any direct first-hand knowledge if it's better to connect a FrameMeister to a CRT, or if one of those cheapo SCART to HDMI adapters will be sufficient. My guess is the FrameMeister will still do a better job because it's just a better device. But on a CRT, it may not matter as much because the CRT is not as capable of those resolutions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a bit of a contradiction, when you say, like, okay, you buy a CRT and, like, okay, I'm gonna do the RGB SCART route and get a cheap SCART to HDMI adapter to put my consoles into that CRT. I know there were some, towards the end of the CRT era, there were some really excellent, Trinitron monitors, that supported both component or even some HDMI.
Yeah.
And, they look great. They really, really do. But they're rare and expensive and heavy. And at that point, if you're going through all this route, jumping through all these hoops in order to hook up your consoles via SCART to HDMI, why don't you? I don't see why you wouldn't just hook it up to a standard HD TV anyway, like, because arguably the cheap SCART to HDMI through a modern HD TV is going to look better than a CRT, with a lot less of the difficulties of just getting this thing in and out of your house.
Yeah, just the pain in the ass of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think there's merit, like, to some degree of putting retro consoles through something like a really good Sony Trinitron or a PVM or something like that. But going through all these hoops in order to hook it up SCART to that thing, just seems kind of, pointless when you have that HD option already for a much cheaper and a much easier way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Although I will admit, I was talking to him a little bit about this as well, and I was like, well, if you're he was specifically trying to hook up the Genesis through like a cheap SCART to HDMI adapter, and then using that into the CRT. So apparently he has one of the CRTs. Or no, sorry, SCART to component. So he has a CRT with component. Yeah. And I was like, if you're going to do that, why not get those like HD Retrovision consoles that are cables they make for the Genesis that are just straight up component cables? Do you know what I'm talking about? And I was like, if you're going to go with the CRT route, go with the path of least resistance. Do it that way. Because using the HDMI adapter, component adapter, that route is really more for the HD TV setup. So, but then again, I haven't used them personally, so I can't say with any great first-hand knowledge that they look better. But, I've chosen my video destiny, which is I'm going to do things the HD TV route, and I'm going to do them the best way I can with that in mind. Just due to pragmatism. I'm not going to try and get a fucking like 200-pound CRT and then find a place to use it, and it's just, I don't have the space for it. And I'm past that.
Yeah. You see, I'm fortunate enough in my setup that, like, I haven't jumped into the ocean of RGB SCART yet. I am planning to eventually, but I have the benefit of having a TV that is new enough. It's a 1080p Sony TV that has HDMI, but it also has inputs that go through composite to S-Video, to component, to VGA. It has all of those in it, so I kind of have the ability of playing certain consoles through S-Videos, certain ones through components, certain ones through HDMI. So, I don't see that big of a rush to jump into that SCART thing until maybe I upgrade to a 4K TV, and HDMI is really all I have.
Yeah.
But
it's expensive because it requires a lot of infrastructure to make it look good, but it looks amazing once you get it right.
Yes.
Yeah. So start putting those teacher paychecks aside because you're gonna need them for the.
or just buy a clone console.
Yeah, just buy a clone console, of course. I would never do that, you monster. But yeah, anything else to say on that particular subject?
No, man, I think we're good.
All right. Thank you very much, Corey. So the next one is movie stuff. Black Panther's about to come out. All right, first of all, do you watch Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm excited about this. Are you?
I am. There's been a little bit of maybe franchise fatigue for me with the MCU over the past few months. Kind of really after Age of Ultron, really.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, just kind of be like, okay, having a new movie released every quarter or something like that. It gets exhausting having to just kind of try and keep up with it because they're all connected. But this is the first one, probably since maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that I'm really, really excited for. Yeah.
It's kind of ironic you say that because this year might be the worst one because we're getting this, and now Deadpool 2 is debatably going to be part of the MCU, which I think is going to be like a retroactive decision they make later. We'll see. But then we're going to have... Go ahead.
Yeah, Deadpool, I think they probably bought this thing with enough time to, probably add an after credits thing of Deadpool walking on with Mickey Mouse ears or something like that. So,
that's possible.
And at least acknowledging it's like, oh yeah, we're in this new thing now. But I think Black Panther. Yeah, but I think Black Panther's gonna be great.
I mean, to be fair to Deadpool, though, Fox still has control over itself for another year, I guess, before they finish that deal. But it wouldn't surprise me if Disney's able to be like, can you just do this or just do that? And they probably would do it because they want the deal to go through. But when people aren't panicking out there, I don't think Disney's going to go in and like PG this thing. That's not the case we're making. It's more like just do a couple things that take it out of the Fox X-Men universe and kind of make it a little more neutral so that it can fit into the MCU if they want it to. Yeah. I think that's kind of the direction they might, if they do any changes, they might not do a damn thing. But that's kind of the way I see it. And then we get Marvel, then we get the Infinity War, right? Like in May?
Yeah, oh my, man, that's coming up soon.
Yeah. And then after that, I think in this summer, we get Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah.
So, like, you have at least 3, debatably 4 if Deadpool 2 counts. And then I think we actually get a long break after that.
Don't we get, we get Infinity War 2 the following year, don't we?
Yeah, the next year, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like 2 years from now, something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, yeah, you're getting a lot of Marvel stuff of just those. Which was kind of the reason I brought this up. Black Panther, other than just being a movie I want to see for the MCU reasons, I do think it's funny that Michael B. Jordan is in it. And he played Johnny Storm in the shitty Fantastic Four Fox movie, which is funny. Good for him. He escaped that movie. But it's also funny because Chris Evans, who played Johnny Storm in Fantastic Four with the Jessica Alba ones, also escaped to the MCU. So it's like if you play that character in a Fox movie, you escape to the MCU somehow. Yeah. Like, that's just, it's funny.
Yeah, well, you've definitely seen almost like a trading of talent between... the DCEU and the MCU. Just, if one person doesn't work out in one, it just kind of gets traded over. The big one is God, I can't remember. The actor who played Deadpool was Green Lantern in DC.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, exactly. Or Ben Affleck played Daredevil. Now he's Batman. They just kind of like, oh, if you don't work out there, you'll probably... Hell, even Brandon Routh, who played Superman in Superman Returns, is getting a second chance with the DC universe, playing one of the guys on the CW
some show.
shows.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But no, in that case, it was still Marvel though, because Fantastic Four is Marvel, but it was under the Fox umbrella. But yeah, I think it was Chris Evans actually made an amusing tweet. Like, now that Disney's getting them, he can play both Johnny Storm and Captain America in the same movie, which would be kind of funny. Of course, they'd never do that, but I guess we're supposed to be talking specifically about Black Panther, but now it's kind of becoming an all-purpose Marvel discussion. I guess I'm excited, although I read, I think it was yesterday, that Disney said like the earliest you're going to see the X-Men appearing in the MCU is like 2020.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense.
I think that's good. I think they don't want to run into the same problem that Sony did with Spider-Man of just having to reboot this thing almost continuously for over the course of 15 years.
Well, that was due to contractual problems.
Yeah, but it's like the quality definitely suffered because of that.
Oh, hell yes.
I think that they're just going to want that bit of separation. I think they're going to want like 2 years where like, okay, we know we have this thing. We're not going to rush. We have these movies planned out already. Mm-hmm. So let's go through these and introduce them organically and give the audiences a break, to absorb that. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, but it's also just like logistically speaking, I guess it makes sense too, because when you think about it, their 2018 is already in the can. Like those movies are done, so they can't put them in any of those. And then even the stuff they're working on to the next phase, I'm sure because they're doing the Infinity War, you're too into your own story to just inject a whole mythos of characters randomly. Yep. So I guess 2020 is the earliest they could do it. Plus, they won't assume full control till next year anyway. Mm-hmm. So it does make sense. So when you think about it that way, it's actually amazing how fast they're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I think there is precedence for this is they had announced, I think it was Phase 2 or Phase 3, when they did Civil War. They announced that movie before they had acquired the rights to have Spider-Man in that. So, and I think it wasn't too soon after that they announced, that they had the rights to him, to be in the MCU, that you got that first trailer with Spider-Man in the airport scene, mm-hmm. that first teaser trailer. So that's why I wouldn't put it past Marvel being able to, inject the Fox franchises into the MCU.
Oh, dude, they're not going to use Fox's versions. They're not going to use Fox. Like the Hugh Jackman is not Wolverine anymore. That's not going to be a thing.
Yeah. But I'm saying like the franchises themselves. Like, I wouldn't put it past them being able to.
You mean like a single scene?
Yeah, exactly. Because like Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man, like a post credits, like throw in an extra scene, like tying it in and just hyping people up for. And that's what I think they probably do with Deadpool too, is that like Deadpool's all about breaking the fourth wall anyway. So just make comments about Star Wars or the Marvel movies or the Mickey Mouse or something like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that is definitely possible. But when you go back and watch Civil War with that in mind, it's kind of obvious because other than the airport scene, which was clearly like the big action scene, he's really the other stuff with him is completely isolated. He's got the one scene at the very end of the movie at the end credits where they could have filmed that on their own anytime. And then of course even when you watch that movie, the fact that Tony Stark just shows up at his house always felt kind of weird and jarring. Because it was like, there's no build-up for this. Like, this only makes sense to us because we already know that character. But if you're just watching as like a casual moviegoer, like, who's this kid? What is this? What is going on? It's a very strange transition.
Yeah. Well, I think they were really banking on that, of them having control over Spider-Man by that time because when they announced Civil War, because I don't know how much you are into the Marvel comics themselves, but like that Civil War storyline, Spider-Man played like this crucial part in that.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So I think like when they announced Civil War, I'm like, oh yeah, you know that they're going to go hard after the Spider-Man license just to have him in that movie, just because. And he didn't end up. The movie didn't end up reflecting that. He's just a kind of an extra gun in the airport fight scene. Mm-hmm. And still isolated, but you could tell that they wanted to do that, and I think they were banking on that.
My understanding is when they were doing Civil War, they basically planned for both options. They basically said we can make it without him, we can make it with him, because they knew they wouldn't be able to make it with him to the point where he is exactly what he is in the comic. But they ended up, getting that Sony deal done just because Sony was desperate. That's how they pulled that one out. Now that movie did really well, have you been following the whole Venom storyline?
Yeah, just that, Sony's probably hijacking the MCU just by trying to inject their own movies into it by proxy.
Yeah, I'm worried about that, but let Disney's lawyers figure that one out.
Well, and that's, I mean, that's my concern about, adding all these new licenses and going back to franchise fatigue is just this thing just getting so big and bloated
Yeah.
with content that all of these smaller studios and license holders are going to try and latch on to this in any way possible,
To be fair, Spider-Man will become a unique situation because I think at that point Marvel will have reacquired all of its characters other than him.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to like go to Fox's permission to use the X-Men anymore. They'll have the X-Men that will be theirs.
Yeah, they just bought,
so
the studio
they don't need
as a whole,
Yeah, exactly. So they'll just have the film rights back. So that won't be a problem, fortunately. I, however, worry about what it does to the MCU as just a universe. I think I said this before on a podcast once, but basically, I've always kind of thought it was a little bit of a blessing that the X-Men aren't part of that universe, because if you live, let's imagine you live in that actual world where the X-Men are a thing, Spider-Man's a thing, they're all things. The majority of supernatural people will be by nature an X-Men. They will be mutants. That's what that is. So it ceases to be an uncommon thing. So Spider-Man is not special in that universe anymore. The only time he's useful is if there's like some big surge of energy that's like attacking only mutants, because then he's down to like one of 14 people that are supernatural for different reasons. So I guess if I'm Joe Schmo on the street and I see like the X-Men fighting something and I see Spider-Man in there, I just assume Spider-Man is an X-Men. I don't see any reason that he is, he was bitten by a radioactive spider. That's different. I don't know that. And I feel like it'll just bloat it with too many characters, possibly.
Yeah. Here, I think Marvel had one opportunity to be able to incorporate the X-Men in a really organic way into the MCU, and that ship has sailed. Do you watch the Netflix shows or the shows on TV like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or anything like that?
I've seen the first 2 seasons of Daredevil, and I've seen the first season of Jessica Jones, as well as Agent Carter.
Yeah, so you didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
No.
So
I heard it was really bad.
The first season is rough, but after the events of a Winter Soldier, it really picked up, and now the show is morphed into something entirely different, and it's really, really entertaining. But that's beside the point. In one of the seasons, they basically introduce the concept of Inhumans, where there's this like a disease or something that I'm trying to remember exactly what happened without giving too much away in case you want to see it, but basically there's this disease which unlocks the potential, this like recessed gene in like a small percentage of the population that have this inhuman gene. So when this thing affects them, they basically gain their power. One person will be able to make earthquakes, or one person will be able to throw flames or something like that. So I think they were really banking on maybe having the rights to X-Men by the time that they wanted to do this in S.H.I.E.L.D. And eventually they did their own TV show, Inhumans, which kind of bombed. But
I would like to go ahead, finish.
Yeah, but so I think the Inhumans were your discount X-Men. They were the placeholder. That, and they just basically, I think if they had done X-Men like that, where it's just like this recessed mutant gene that only a small percentage of people have, and it unlocks, like something unlocks this gene in you, and you kind of create this X-Men mutant, minority. I think that would have been, because if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the way it plays out is very much like X-Men, where it's like they're oppressed, and the public's against them, and there's good ones and there's bad ones, and kind of takes a lot of the notes from X-Men.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head, except the behind the scenes drama of how that occurred is pretty different. So basically, Kevin Feige is the dude who's running the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the movie section. He has no control over like the TV stuff, even though they keep saying, it's all part of the same universe. It would be very easy to wipe it all out. The guy who has a lot of control over the TV universe stuff is a guy named Ike Perlmutter. And Ike Perlmutter he really doesn't like Kevin Feige. They don't really get along. They have very conflicting ideas. Disney ultimately sided with Kevin Feige. That's why he has control of the movies now. But so Ike Perlmutter was constantly pushing the X-Men, but he couldn't get them because they were at Fox, so he decided to mutate no pun intended, the Inhumans into the X-Men. But that didn't really work out because ultimately he pushed for them to get their own show and their own movie and everything, and their show was a disaster, and the movie was canceled straight up once Kevin Feige had complete control, because I don't think Kevin Feige ever wanted to use them. My understanding of the situation is that Kevin Feige understands more about what the actual characters are and their purpose. Like, Perlmutter is more of a money guy. So he just sees, like, oh, these are a band of, like, weird characters. They could be the X-Men. Fuck it. Let's just make them the X-Men now. And it doesn't really work that way.
I do think it's a shame that they kind of burned that one opportunity of, like, this gene that gets unlocked to introduce, like, a large group of superhumans, you know, because I think if they were to do something like that with the X-Men, which is, I think, a good way of would have been a good way of introducing them, like, everybody's just going to call bullshit. Like, oh yeah, you did this before. You did this with the Inhumans, you know, and that kind of sucked. So.
Here's the thing. I will bet you at some point Ike Perlmutter will get ousted completely, and they're going to just drop all the continuity that is certain shows. Inhumans will not be canon. I wouldn't be surprised if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ceases to be canon, because they can easily get away with that. And just dropping certain TV shows from canon. Like the way Disney dropped, like, all expanded Star Wars content from being canon. I could easily see them doing that as soon as Kevin Feige assumes full control, because I really don't think he likes it that there's these expanded stories that he can't control because they inherently contradict his own universe, and he just has to ignore it. Like, when you have Daredevil, for example, be canon, why doesn't he show up when you could use him in, like, the Avengers or something like that? I'm thinking it's a lot of stuff like that he would prefer to oust, to get rid of as soon as he can.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like, early on, it was tied heavily to what was going on in the movies. Like, when Thor Dark World happened, and, like, there was this one part that takes place in England. Like, the next week on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there's, like, it's tied in, they're cleaning up that alien incursion.
Yeah.
Or when Winter Soldier happens and Hydra is revealed to be, you know, in control of S.H.I.E.L.D., that's basically a season-long arc in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. of them dealing with those repercussions, to the point where, like, Nick Fury actually shows up a few times in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to really tie all of that together. But now it's almost so far removed. Like, this last season, the last couple seasons have been really, really abstract in a lot of ways, and have just been really, really great standalone things, you know, just kind of on the periphery of the MCU. So, you know, well, I think it works like that, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but I wouldn't, and like I said, I saw Daredevil and I really liked it, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they just remove those from continuity. It just wouldn't, It would not surprise me. Anything else to say on this, or do you want to go to our last subject?
Yeah, I mean, did you have anything to say on Black Panther in particular? I mean,
well, I was just brought it up because I'm looking forward to seeing it. That's about it. And if there was any thoughts on it, and we kind of obviously did that. We veered the hell off, but we want to see Black Panther is basically the point.
Yeah. Bottom line, it looks awesome. Can't wait to see it.
Yeah. All right. So our last subject was also something you wanted to talk about, which was that Quentin Tarantino is potentially directing the next Star Trek film. Go for it.
Well, I know, like, you've mentioned it secondarily on your channel a couple times in live streams that you're, like, a Star Trek fan, and, like, we even spoke a little bit about it during your time in New York, so figured it time that we talk a little bit about it, you know. And had you heard about this?
Yes,
this
I had.
Potential thing.
Yeah, basically. Go ahead. Yeah. You got it. You take it.
So basically, Tarantino has said in interviews, dating back a while, he's always said that he loves Star Trek, and it was actually a big inspiration for his writing in his films. And he's basically come out and said that he would love to direct a Star Trek film, and that it actually really snowballed a good deal, where he says, I'd love to direct a Star Wars film, to him basically pitching a script or like a screenplay to J.J. Abrams and Paramount for a Star Trek film. And apparently J.J. Abrams was, like, blown away. He loves it. And now it's kind of said it's kind of snowballed even more that Patrick Stewart, who played Jean-Luc Picard in Next Generation, has said that he would come back and play Picard one more time only if Tarantino is directing the movie. So now it's this whole thing that started as this offhand comment has really gained a lot of traction and might actually happen to that point.
Yeah, I hadn't followed it that closely, but yeah, that's definitely exciting to me. But what I had heard about it is they didn't know if it would be the fourth in like a JJ universe, or if this is another reboot, or if this is an attempt to go back to the old Prime universe. Part of what I guess might screw that up now, I don't know if you'd heard this, but it looks like Viacom might be remerging Paramount and CBS together. And that would mean reunifying the Star Trek rights, which would actually make things a little bit easier, because that's kind of the untold story about why the new Star Trek universe kind of looks the way it does, is because some of the rights belong to the film division and some of the rights belong to the television division. So they can use the character names, but they can't make them look the way they're supposed to look, stuff like that. This would essentially fix that problem, perhaps all in one go. And you could essentially, I don't know if that's ever been done before, where you take a movie that reboots back to the old universe. I don't know if we've ever done that before.
No, I don't believe so. And here's my thing. A bottom line, I love the idea of Tarantino doing it. I'm a huge fan of his films. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on him.
I like some of them. I don't like others.
Yeah. But I think that Star Trek as a franchise is very lukewarm in the public eye. Like, you had the J.J. Abrams reboot from 2009, which did really well, and then the sequels just declined in ticket sales and everything since then.
Which is too bad, because Beyond was actually very good.
I loved Beyond. I thought it was the best of the three, actually. But,
I agree. It was the best of those three movies, and it did the worst.
Yeah. Which is a shame, and Paramount said that they had greenlit another Simon Pegg helmed fourth movie in that.
When did universe. They say it?
Right after Beyond.
Right, exactly. That's why.
Yeah,
because if they that's a marketing move. They tell you that, so they're like, oh well, there's gonna be another one, so I better go see this one.
Yeah. Well, they said it was right after Beyond, and they said that Justin Lin and Simon Pegg, who did Beyond, were going to helm it again, and that it was actually going to involve time travel, and that they had signed on Chris Hemsworth to return to the franchise because he played Kirk's father in the first one, in like the first opening scene.
It is a weird when you go back and watch it and you see him there, you're like, oh shit, Thor.
Yeah, because it was right before kind of Thor, kind of like happened, so it was kind of before he hit it big. But
the other cameo in there that nobody ever remembers?
No.
R2-D2.
Oh yeah, he flies by.
Yeah, he flies by a ship in debris. Yeah.
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams directed both, so he just fused all those universes together. You're welcome.
Well, they always said that the first Star Trek, that he directed is basically just a Star Wars film anyway. So it made sense that he goes on to direct Star Wars. But anyway, so I love the idea of Tarantino doing it. I don't think if I was a betting man, I think that his would actually not be tied to either the JJ verse or the Prime universe. I think that I think something that he would be really in his wheelhouse to do would be a mirror universe movie.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Like, you're talking about, we made a joke about it before, but like with Tim Inman, but you're talking about where the beard is reversed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah, his style of filmmaking, it's like, if you were going to put him in a Star Trek movie, and like he obviously does a lot of things really well pertaining to Star Trek. He does really good character-based, intense drama scenes in between the bloody action, which would lend itself really well to a Star Trek film. But
I just want to clear something up for people watching in case they don't watch Star Trek. In Star Trek lore, there's the universe that all the characters are in, but there's this other negative universe where history played out differently. And then for everybody that exists, there's just like an evil version of them on that side. That's a thing. And so presumably we're talking about a universe where Quentin Tarantino makes a movie inside that evil universe. Because every show, I believe, had at least one episode where they went into that universe. Or it was acknowledged at least.
Except for Next Generation, Voyager did not. But
Next Generation and Voyager didn't.
Yeah. It might be a little bit of a spoiler, but Discovery has a Mirror Universe episode, and so does the original series and Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise as well.
Yeah,
so.
I remember the Enterprise one really well, because like
That
Hitler
one's great,
standing
yeah.
at the Empire State Building and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
there's like Nazis on the moon, like weird shit.
Yeah,
I remember that. God, are you sure that? Because I remember. Which one am I thinking of? There's the beginning where who's the guy played by James Cromwell who like invented the warp drive?
that was an Enterprise.
So you know what I'm talking about? Would there be the opening?
Yeah,
the Vulcans come down and just fucking kills them.
and he shoots them. Yeah,
yeah. Okay,
that was an Enterprise.
Okay, all right. So yeah, that definitely was a thing, and it's pretty cool. So the idea of making an entire movie in there is potentially what Quentin Tarantino would be doing. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
And that's why it's like I think that I think if they gave him a movie to direct and have him write a script in the JJ verse or in the Prime universe, I think he would do it. I think he would do it well, despite what some people might think of like the style of movie that he would make. I think he has a real reverence for the 1960s television and films that he would do it justice and put aside his hyper-violent, style of filmmaking to do something. But if you wanted to do a hyper-violent R-rated Star Trek film, the way to do it would be in the Mirror Universe.
I agree
all
completely.
Of that stuff is fair game, yeah.
See, what I would like to see, kind of floating along with that, this fourth one where that's exactly what happens. You have like the current crew or whatever, and they get sent into the hyper universe or whatever you call it, and over there it's just you have the ability to kill those legacy characters willy-nilly because it's not really them.
Yeah.
And you can have all sorts of drama with characters you would never have otherwise expected. Shatner could still be Kirk and he could be alive. Picard can be there just as he said he would be. And like you can have scenes with them like fighting. You can have scenes with them like killing each other and killing other members of the crew. And you're like, because none of this is real.
Oh man, just give like Patrick Stewart an eye patch or something like that. Just like, oh, it'd be so great.
It really would. And I would say, do it sooner than later while you still have all the captains are currently still alive, right? Yeah. So you could do that. And that would be the insane one I would want to see. If you're going to go like full nuts with it, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. And, I had a bit of a debate with another fellow, Star Trek fan who's a friend of mine who says like, oh, it would be terrible. Could you imagine just like this war-torn Star Trek universe where everybody's kind of evil and out to get one another and it's really dark and there's no hope or anything? I'm like, yeah, it's called Deep Space Nine. We already had it and it was awesome.
Yeah, I loved it.
So
I mean, like, to be honest, man, like, there's not. I mean, Star Trek is a franchise that's largely tapped out. So you gotta do something insane with it. And I think that would be really up there.
Having arguably the biggest filmmaker on the planet, to do an episode, do a movie would definitely get public attention.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, I could see why that would piss off, let's say, purists. People who really liked Beyond, like such as us, are probably actual like legit Star Trek fans who really appreciated a lot of the message that show was trying to make originally. I could see why this is the exact opposite of that message. So it's not like I don't get it, but at the same time, times have reflected that people don't really want to watch that kind of storyline anymore. And even as good as Beyond was, it still suffered from like villain of the week syndrome. So you got to do something deeper, I think. And this could be that by basically taking all the most famous heroes and icons of that, but essentially making them not the characters you want to think of them as, because they're really literally not. And that, I don't know, I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, I think it would be too. And on a side note, one last note about Star Trek, you really should watch Discovery.
I know I should.
You might have heard some stuff about it, and there's definitely some bad, but I think as a whole, it's really, really entertaining.
That's what I've heard.
If you liked a Deep Space Nine, or if you liked the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, from the mid 2000s, it's like, you'll love it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm totally for checking it out. I might, if it ever gets a Blu-ray release, that might be where I would pick it up.
Yeah.
Because I'm about that physical media. I just don't want to sign up for CBS Access or whatever.
Oh, dude, I'll give you my login. I don't care.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
might as well give somebody access to it, yeah.
Because there's no other reason to have it, yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Well, thank you. So anything else you want to say on this, or are we good, man?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on this podcast with me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much to everyone else who backed it. Corey, Tim, Trey, Jonas, Justin. And thank you everybody who just supports the Patreon in general or just listens to this even when it goes public. I appreciate that too. So again, thank you, Rob. Anything else to say before we go?
Oh, thank you for giving me opportunity. I had a great time, and anytime you get sick of talking to yourself and want to bring me back on, just give me a shout.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Later, everybody.
Have a good one.